they say, was born in Virginia. You know, that's the state right above us. He was born in Virginia, they say in 1756. Here's the problem. The rock house, they say, was begun, like the foundation was laid in 1770. So how old would he have been when he started building the rock house? Who's good at math?
Say what?
If he was born in 1756 and he started building it in 1770, how old was he when he started building it?
14.
Say it again.
14.
Very good. He would have been 14. Well, he could have been, because guys back then were way more, you know, they started working earlier than, no offense, than most kids today. But we really think he was born a whole lot earlier than that. And there's his tombstone at the end of the Rock House Road. Has anybody been to the graveyard where he's buried? One of us. I don't know that we'll have time to go down there today, and there's not a lot of room to park. But his tombstone is wrong, very possibly, because it says his date of death was even a different time. Then we know he died earlier than his tombstone says. But his tombstone was erected many, many years after he died, so somebody just got it wrong. So we don't know when he was born, 1750s, we think, in Virginia. So he started building this house in about 1770. But then he quit, because somebody tell me what was going on all through the 1770s. Who knows something historically? And if there's no, just throw it out.
Was there war?
Which war? Yes, you're right. Which war?
Revolution.
Look at that. Our newest 4-H'er. The Revolutionary War,
Smarter
which
than
was
me.
also called the War for Independence, started going on like 1775. So this man started building this house, and he's young. He's not a whole lot older than Malachi, and he's building this house, and he quits because he becomes involved in the war. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But he finished the house in 1785, give or take a few years. He finished the house because he got married. And when he got married, I figure his wife was like, are you ever going to finish that house that you started building? It's time to have all these children. And they did have 10, by the way, and brought them up right here. I think 9 lived to adulthood and were brought up here. So he didn't finish the house till he got married. We don't know the scoop, but I figure the wife was like, finish the house so we can live there. So it took him about 15 years to get it totally finished. So let's talk a little bit about what was going on when he built it before we talk about the actual house. He was a war hero, from what we hear. Records talk about him being very brave, such a courageous man. Some say he was a little bit foolhardy, which means he would rush into dangerous situations. He lived all of his life with buckshot in his temple because he got shot in the Revolutionary War in the head, and they left him for dead, and he got up and rejoined his company because he was just that kind of guy. They never could get all the buckshot out of his head. They say that when he came to this area that he was maybe 15 years old when he actually came here, and when he did, he bought about 400 acres of land. Before he died, they say he owned over 7,000 acres of land. I don't know if that's been proven, but that's what a lot of the historical records say. So 400 acres is going to go way, way, way farther than you can even see here. Now, when he bought it, you can imagine all these trees weren't here like they are now. He could actually see all the way down to parts of Hanging Rock State Park. That's according to the records. He could see the area of Torrey's Den. Now, if you've been to Torrey's Den, raise your hand. You know what Torrey's Den is if you've been there, and if you haven't, it's a great place to go. I've never been till 2 weeks ago. Torrey's Den is where during the Revolutionary War, the Tories supposedly would hide. It was a cave, and you can still go in the cave today. I didn't go. It looks like you can just keep winding back through. We didn't
too
try.
tight.
It is very tight. I would never try that. But they say that over 100 Tories at one time were hiding in that cave, which is why it's called Torrey's Den. Does anybody know what a Tory was back then? I guess we have Tories now. Anybody?
A cave.
Well, Torrey's Den was a cave, and the Tories were there. That's so weird, looking right at Spider-Man while he's giving me the answers. That's good, though. A Tory at that time. Okay, let's say y'all had been living here for, hey, that's great, I'm shaded. Let's say you'd all been living here for 100 years. You want your own country. But yet, who rules you? What country is ruling you if you had lived in the 1700s? Just tell me, what country? Say it loud. Who said it? Thank you. Britain. So England was ruling you. That means King George over there, he's the third, I believe, King George the third, was telling you what to do. But you didn't have any representation over there. You weren't sending representatives over there to help make your own laws. So the people in this country began to say, we want our own country. But let's just pretend. I'll use my family, for example. Let's say that my family, we've been living here and we like King George. We like England. We don't want to split from England. So we would have been called the Loyalists because we were loyal to King George. They were also called the Tories. There's a long reason for that I'm not going to go into. It's good to Google it and see, though. So the Tories and the Loyalists were the same thing. They wanted to stay with England. They didn't want to break free and have America as a separate country. So here we are, and we're all neighbors, and we've all been friends. Like, let's take Melissa and Mason. She's my cousin. So we've been cousins, but Melissa wants her own country, and I don't. I want to stay loyal to the king. Well, this created a lot of animosity even between neighbors in Stokes County. So there were people who all of a sudden used to be your friend and they don't like you anymore because you don't agree with their political position. Wow, that sounds familiar. But John Martin here, Colonel Jack, was absolutely wanting America to be its own country. So he hunted down Tories. They say, if you go read the little sign at Tory's Den, if you've been there, you probably read it. I don't know if it's true, but the sign says that the Tories, again, that's the ones that want to be with the King of England, raided this house because they needed supplies. The Revolutionary War is going on, and when England sends their soldiers to America, the Tories go fight with them. So the Tories are Americans like us. Well, they weren't American yet, but they lived here, and they went and fought with the Redcoats, the British soldiers. And they need supplies because the war is going on even around here in a minor way. So they came here supposedly and raided for supplies. One legend has it that they kidnapped Colonel Jack's daughter. Again, he had 10 kids, so I don't know which daughter it was. They say that they kidnapped one of his daughters for ransom. Who knows what ransom means?
For money.
They want money. We'll give her back if you'll give us this. So they took, we don't know what they took. Maybe they took his girl, maybe they just took supplies, but they headed off to the cave, which is now Tory's Den. Well, supposedly then, he could, I don't know which direction it would be. If anybody's good with directions, tell me where Tory's Den is. Is it about that way?
Right?
I would think.
Be out that way?
That's
I'll imagine that way.
But
But
Yeah,
they
I
say
see
that
it.
he could see it, that he could see the fires, that they were burning, because, you know, they had to have a fire to keep warm, cook food, whatever. They say that Colonel Jack, from his house, now look at that house. You can see maybe why he could see it. How many stories does this house have right now?
2.
It has 2. How many did it used to have? Anybody know?
3.
If you count the basement, it had 4. There was a higher level, and then the basement counted as a full story because their dining room was in the basement. Their kitchen and everything was down there. So 4 stories. So Colonel Jack could get up at the top of that house and look yonder way, as they say, and all those trees may not have been there like they are now, and he could see smoke rising. So they say that he gathered together a lot of his neighbors and took off to rescue, if his daughter was there, to rescue her, but to get the Tories. Now, I don't want to be graphic, but there's 2 sides of what could have happened. Some say he went with his neighbors and captured the Tories and took them prisoners of war. Others say that they did away with all the Tories. I don't know what's true. But some say that they did kill pretty much all the Tories who were down there. Don't know. But he was supposedly a war hero. When he was in the Revolutionary War, he was just a lieutenant. Well, I mean, I say just a lieutenant. That's not a private, so he was a lieutenant. However, later in life, when the war was over, he still was a part of the local militia. And if you don't know what a militia is, it's basically a community home-based army that could rise up should there be trouble. So Colonel Jack later in the militia became a colonel. So for those who argue that we shouldn't call him Colonel Jack, I disagree. Because even though it was just the militia and not the real, army, he was still a colonel. The reason they made him a lieutenant right away is because he was such a leader. Even before the Revolutionary War started, he'd already been fighting off the Indians because there was a lot of battles here even with the Native Americans back then. Think about it. You're talking about the mid-1700s. It's still wild and woolly around here. So Colonel Jack had already been fighting the Native Americans to sort of, keep them from attacking. So because of his experience, they made him the lieutenant. Now this house was so huge that people would come here and use it as a fort. Like when the Native Americans would try to come and attack, and you would hear the rumor, especially during the French and Indian War, that had gone on, but it was over by the time he came here, but there was still animosity there. So when you would hear a rumor, I've heard it, they're getting ready to attack, the Indians are getting ready to attack, people would rush to Colonel Jack's house and use it as a fort. Because you can imagine, you could fit a whole lot of people in that house. And not only that, when it was time for the Revolutionary War to start, the soldiers would congregate here. It was like a rallying point for all the troops in the Revolutionary War. Now, when I think about the Revolutionary War, I'm going to tell you that my brain thinks it lasted like a year. Because let's test some history here. When was the Declaration of Independence signed? 1776. Okay, to me, I always thought, well, hey, by the time we signed that, we were our own country, right? But that war went on a long time, and I always forget that somehow. Does anybody know when the war started?
Is it 74?
75?
I think there were tensions in 1775.
There were, and in fact, the first shot that was fired was 1775. Sorry, y'all. Are y'all okay with the sun? If it's just me, I'm not worried.
I'm in the shade.
I don't want y'all to get too hot or in the sun. So in 1775, you started firing the shots. Wasn't there the shot heard round the world? Or, you fired
Yeah,
that
the shot that no one knows about.
Yeah, nobody really knows who fired it. But the war started. By 1776, we signed the Declaration of Independence. Think about it. He was building that house during that time. So the war's going on, 1775, 76, 77, 78. Does anybody know when it ended? This one's a tough question.
79.
No?
76.
82?
Close?
81.
83. You were really close. So the war, if you can even say officially, I don't know, because there were still tensions, but the war supposedly ended in 1783. Our first president didn't come along, George Washington, until 1789. So it's crazy that we had those 6 years without even a one central leader. But that's another story. But Colonel Jack was involved in all that, because this was his time period when all this was going on. At one point, when he was in the Revolutionary War, he was with a group, like a company of soldiers called the Over Mountain Men. And can't you see why that's true? I mean, look, if you just look all through there, you can see the mountains. They were called the Over Mountain Men. And he went down to fight with them near Kings Mountain. Is that near Charlotte? I didn't look that up. Where's Kings Mountain? Anybody know where Kings Mountain is? Rats. I should have looked it
king.
up. I think it's down near Charlotte, but I could be wrong. So, not you, but near the city, Charlotte. So, Kings Mountain, when he fought down there, he was such a brave guy that when they said, hey, we need some scouts. We need some of y'all brave young men to go scout out the area. Go get on your horses and go see what the enemy's doing. Colonel Jack was like, yeah, I'll do it. So he and a friend of his named Thomas Langford, I think he was from around here too, took off to be the scouts to see what was going on. And that's when he got shot in the head. And they were leaving him for dead. But next thing you know, he comes walking into camp alive. He was wounded another time in the war, but he was pretty tough. Now, it was actually this month, October, but the year was 1780 when he was down at Kings Mountain, when he got wounded in the head. I thought it was interesting. It's this very month that he got shot the way he did. Now, has anybody ever been to Guilford Courthouse near Greensboro? It's where a battle was fought with General Nathaniel Greene. I have never been there, and I'm determined to go. So I'm going to plan a field trip if anybody wants to go to the Guilford Courthouse. Again, a Revolutionary War battle was fought there, and Colonel Jack was part of that. After he finished up down near Charlotte, I think it was, he went to Greensboro area and fought with General Nathaniel Greene. We've already talked about Tory's Den. This is what a famous historian in the 1800s wrote about Colonel Jack. So I want you to think about what kind of guy this says he is. A man of great energy, indomitable courage, and infinite humor. He was distinguished for his patriotism, spirit, and independence. Sounds like he was a very brave, funny. They said he was very witty. energetic fella. So when he was about 30 years old, since we don't know exactly when he was born, we're guessing, when he was around 30 is when he decided it's time to get married. So he married in 1784 a lady named Nancy Ship with two P's. You know, not like the ship on the ocean, Ship with two P's. She was from Virginia, and her family had moved to this area too. She was maybe 10 years younger than him, so she was very young. He married her. They had the 10 kids. Only 9 made it to adulthood. She was known as this wonderful hostess. You know, she had this humongous house. I'm sure she had servants. They did have slaves. Unfortunately, back then people did. So they had slaves, and she was known for her beautiful china and all the beautiful furnishings there. And in the basement, which was her dining room, she had a fireplace big enough to put a whole ox. You know how big an ox is? Like, it's bigger than a normal cow. She had a fireplace big enough to put an entire ox to roast it for supper for whoever was coming. Now that is a humongous fireplace. So Nancy Ship, very interesting woman if you ever want to Google and study her. Now after the war was over and he was back here raising the family and farming all this land, he still wanted to serve his country. So they nominated him to be Stokes County's representative to go, I don't know if it was Raleigh then, I don't know where it would have been in the 1700s. He was nominated to go be like our House of Representatives guy for Stokes County. It was then called the North Carolina House of Commons. So he represented Stokes County in government, going down there, making decisions. But not only that, for about 30 years, he was a judge and a magistrate in Stokes County. And they say he was known for his humor in the courtroom. That even in a serious situation, he was going to say something funny, just to lighten the mood, you would say. Now, here's the sad news. In 1822, so we've gotten through the 1700s, the war is over, we are America now. In 1822, a fire broke out on this property. I don't know where it was, and if anybody knows history about this, feel free to help me out. But there was a fire somewhere on the property, and everybody went to fight that fire, and he did too. But by this time, let's see, 1822, he's getting older. I mean, he's close to 70. He may be right at 70. He goes to fight the fire, and all of a sudden his wife leaves him because he gets tired, and they said that he laid down on a rock. They said you could see the rock from the house. One of his relatives said we could see the rock from the house. I don't know where it was. But they said that he went and laid out flat on a rock and was tired, and when Nancy came back, he had died. So they don't know if maybe the effort of fighting the fire, he had a heart attack. Don't know. But he was gone in 1822. His tombstone says 1823, which is absolutely false because his will actually was talked about in 1822. So his wife Nancy outlived him by a whole lot of years. She died in 1841. So she was younger anyway. She lived a lot more years. But now, before we finish up, that's enough about Colonel Jack. And if you have questions, we can take those at the end. But when you look at this house, and it was, as we said, 4 stories tall, counting the basement. I brought this yardstick because there were some of the walls in the house that were 3 feet thick. So you got a yardstick is obviously 3 feet. I mean, my wall at home, I don't know, maybe my wall's about that thick. The walls were this thick. And they say, and I did not examine this, but they said you could still see some of the gun ports in the walls of the house where they would literally have to put their guns to fight off the Tories or the Indians. So if anybody sees the gun ports.
They're in the back.
So, and we're going to go around there when we finish up.
So would this be the front of the house, technically?
I think this would have been the front with the front stoop there.
Yeah.
And we're going to go to the back, but it had a big old sign that I didn't want you to read just yet. I didn't realize that one was there. But we talked about the fireplace. It could be seen, it was so tall, you could see it for miles around. Does anybody know what color it was? It looks like it's just rock, like kind of gray and goldish rock. But what color was it?
Probably lime wash. Was it like a white,
It was white.
like lime?
Yes. But the interesting thing is, she was right, it was like washed on the outside with white that was made from crushed seashells. Yeah, like a tabby construction almost, if you know what that is. So this house was white. and standing up 4 stories tall, and you can imagine how that would have been just a showplace for people looking from miles and miles around. I told you about it being used as a fort, but the sad thing is it's been a ruin since the late 1800s. In 1897, a fire destroyed a lot of it. Some people say a windstorm came through, maybe like, when Hurricane Ian came through this area a month or 2 ago, ruined a lot of stuff. Somebody said that played a role. So nobody's lived here since the late 1800s, at least. They might have been gone before that. And the problem is, even though it's on the National Register of Historic Places, so it's famous. I mean, you can see there's not a lot of big touristy stuff around here, but people do come to see it from other states even. They come to see this place, especially if they're studying Revolutionary War history. But it began to, let me ask you. I was going to tell you the answer, but I'm going to ask you. What all do you think could have happened through all those years that nobody lived here that made them have to come put this fence up?
Still in the rocks.
They were still in the rocks. People were coming from all over the place to see it, and they would go in there and say, well, it's not going to hurt if I take this little rock. But if 1,000 people take a little rock, pretty soon there's no rock house. Does anybody have another idea of why that fence was put up? That's the main one.
Safety. Because rocks were falling.
Safety. I heard you say safety, and that goes with what Trenton said. Yes, notice how it says caution, watch your step, watch for falling rocks, because this thing is very unsturdy. They came in, Wake Forest sent a group out at one point and tried to put some poles and posts to you can see some of them still to try to sturdy it up. But this thing is, you could have been in there and all of a sudden it falls on you, and then there's liability and somebody could sue somebody. So they decided to put the fence up. And one of my final questions here, who has been here before the fence was up and you've been in the rock house? Okay, just us. I used to come up here and just hang out and bring my kids. And we would walk all in there. I got pictures of me sitting up on the steps, waving at everybody, and you could go look all down in it. It was very, very cool, but I'm sure it was dangerous. What'd you say?
There used to be a floor level.
Yeah, down in there you could see down in the basement in some parts.
Is it deep?
About like another story of a house.
Yeah, but there used to be a floor level on top of the basement.
There was a partial one.
Yeah, that we could
Still.
walk on.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
We did used to come and hang out here because it was a very cool place, and the fence was not here. You could just explore the rock house. The Stokes County Historical Society owns the property now.
Could you see a fireplace hold? The place
I can't remember. That's a good question. I have pictures. I might go back and look at my pictures once we go to the meeting site. I'll look at the pictures and maybe show y'all what it looked like
If you have
inside.
signal to look at the pictures.
Now, the Stokes County Historical Society raised money to pay for this fence. They say that fence is 7 feet tall.
I'll say that's pretty accurate.
I don't know.
I'll say it's taller than Elijah, and
They
he's
say
6
it's
something.
7'4". That's what it actually says. And there was a local guy, I wrote his name down, Charles something, Charles Nelson. Anybody heard of Charles Nelson? Local guy actually crafted this whole fence. It cost a lot of money. And everywhere you see one of these, I think it's every 10 feet, you got a big post. It goes down 30 inches into concrete. So it is pretty secure here. They raise money just from citizens. Like Mandy's family might say, we love the rock house, we're gonna give $10, and the McHughes give 20. Took thousands and thousands of dollars to build that fence. This is a cool thing.
I don't want the fence.
They did a play called
like a
Sure
fence.
and Steadfast. Think about the name of that play, and think about this house. This house has been standing since the 1700s. It's pretty sure and steadfast. And so the play was written by somebody in the county about the rock house, and I played the wife of Colonel Jack, and I was much younger, but I was young Nancy Shipp, and my husband Alan played young Colonel Jack. So and does anybody know Maya Burgess, who used to be in our 4-H club? Maya played our daughter. So we were actually in a play about this that raised money to put in this fence. At the time, truthfully, I wasn't thrilled about the fence, but I did the play. But I understand the fence.
I'm not thrilled about the fence. I wish it wasn't here.
Well, I still understand it. So now, that's all I'm going to tell you. I can answer questions. I may or may not have an answer. But I want us to walk around this way because we've probably not seen that side of it today. Let's go all the way around to where there's a big sign over
Mom,
there.
do you want me to keep on recording?
Yeah, just go and show the house as
Okay.
you go around.
I am. What? They should have thought about that. I feel like if you're smart enough, you could film there. There are midgets in this world, you know.
And people with shovels.
Yeah, people with a shovel too. People could dig onto here. I told you, if people want to get in here, they could climb the fence. This fence is not that high. It's enough to
Scrape that
climb.
dirt off.
Well, this is gonna be
I
on
could get
Facebook
over it in
page.
like 4 seconds. Dude.
You could. I could climb it if I wanted to. Not that.
Climb a straight foot.
What?
How are you gonna climb a straight foot?
Damn.
You can pull yourself up there.
Yes, I can. I was trying to think you think.
I don't think so.
And
All right, everybody gather around one more time.
wasn't
Let me
saying
show you
to.
one thing. Unfortunately, you can't really see this picture here, but if you all were down at Maratock Furnace, remember our last meeting, we were down at Maratock Park and we looked at the old furnace that made, what, iron? Remember we saw a painting by a man named Frank Duncan, and I said, this is what he thinks that it used to look like? Well, this is what Frank Duncan did to show what he thinks the rock house looked like long ago. So I don't know if you want to come up close to try to look at it. You're welcome to. Nobody really knows. They have no pictures, no photo. We have no photographs. But Frank Duncan is a local artist, and he painted that.
Is he still alive?
Yeah. He's at the Stokes Stomp every year with a
What
booth.
year did he do it?
I'm not sure. That's a good question.
Oh Lord, I can't see.
Do
I
you
do
reckon
not
that
know.
these piles of rocks are from what they've collected from the debris that's fallen already?
That's where
That's what
Melissa
I
goes.
think.
That's
Yeah.
what she was guessing. Does anybody have any questions? I don't know that I can answer them because I told you about all I know about it. I don't know what it is about this place. I
Didn't we
love
find
to
out
come.
it had been damaged along the way, and then they tried to restore it a couple of times?
They did try to
And
restore
like
it.
fix
Yes.
things.
Well,
Wouldn't it have been cool?
Could you imagine living? I mean, and like you said, you never know if something. Like you might just wake up and just something falling.
Yeah, exactly.
well, the fence is pretty dusty.
But
It
I
is.
also
They need to clean
wonder
it.
about
Yeah,
all
they
of
have
this
to
rock
clean
that's
it.
everywhere. It's kind of a theme up back near where we live on Brown
Actually.
Mountain. This rock, this kind of like rock structures are
could
very
fit through the
popular up
walls.
that way. Have you noticed that?
And
a
I
lot
like
of
it.
the
If
you're
Martin
short enough, you
family,
could fit through the
they
walls.
live over there as well. So I wonder if there's any
Or you would
connection.
also
Are
be
you
skinny.
connected to the Martins on
Probably
that
like
side,
Jacob
off of
skinny.
CCC?
If Jacob was
I don't-
short, he could fit through
They all
there.
have a huge claim.
But he's too tall.
Oh, okay.
We got to find this out.
Okay, then Jacob could fit in
That's
there.
really cool though.
I just,
I don't think so. He's pretty skinny. He's skin and bones.
before you leave, you might want to look at the doors and windows. Look how they did the rocks.
Everybody
over
on
the,
video is
how in the
hearing
world
me
did they do that? They just put like these flat rocks to arch the windows and the doors. That's crazy.